Okay, welcome to my tutorial. Today I'd like to share how to paint a small outcropping of a forest. I'm just gonna head right in. I start with my sketch, so I'm going to be using Procreate only brushes today, which here under my folder original favorites is basically all my original Procreate favorite brushes, but yeah, you can find them under the name, of course. So first, grab a sketching brush. I'm going to be using the HB pencil and go ahead and start adding some trees. I'm just going to add a pine tree first, maybe a couple like that, and I'd like to have a nice and large sort of oak tree in there as well. Just adding some areas of the leaves. Why not add a second tree? And I want to bring all of these together somehow, so let's just add a bit of land, a couple of rocks in there. I'm going to refine the sketch in just a moment and adjust the different proportions. And I'd like to have, hello. I'm just going to make this slightly smaller and then add one more pine tree in the front here, sort of completing the edge here. Yeah, we're getting into we'll get into the details in a moment. Right, I'm gonna add a couple of bushes and stuff. Okay, don't confuse yourself too much when you're painting this. This is a little bit confusing, but I've had an idea and I'm just gonna run with it. Add another couple of stones, and here I'm just gonna put these at the edge and some more edge. Okay, I'm going to clean this sketch up now. So I usually go ahead and lower the opacity of my sketch layer and then just basically get those lines a little bit more obvious. I'm gonna make this tree fatter and just go ahead and straight add its crown. A little bit like this. Add that front section again. This is just sort of to break up the shape as well and to give me an orientation of where to go with my colors and that first later. Get that pine tree back. Maybe give it a bit of ruffled feathers on the side. Not too symmetrical. And the trunk is sort of, oops. I feel like this looks a bit like a skirt. Get that trunk in there like that. It feels a bit indecent to draw this. The whole point of me making this actually, this little piece is so I don't create another 3-hour tutorial. At least that's what it feels like when I make those long ones. And I always think, do people actually want to see 3 hours of painting process? Get those bushes in. Again, it's like not perfect. I feel like I mention that every time I'm at this part in the painting stage. Get that other little tree in there in the background. Probably not going to add the trunk there, it's sort of just going to fade in. Get a bit of grass and path there. Get a couple of boulders over here, and of course this wonderful tree. Sort of wanted it to lean a little bit, but you can always adjust that later. Yeah, no, I'm going to select this wonderful shape I made with a lasso tool and just move it. I'm going to use this dart down there and pull it slightly to the right and just sort of make it look like it's trying not to fall off the edge there. Give it a bit of character. At this point I feel like it's quite hard to see where I'm painting now and where the sketch, the first sketch starts and stops, so I think this will about do for this part. I'm gonna hide the first sketch. Just check, is there anything you've missed that is important in terms of information? I didn't include these two rocks, so I think I'm just gonna add like 1, 2 little boulders here. I don't know about them being on the edge, and I'm gonna delete the first one. So that is the first part done. Now on to adding our color blocking part. So I'm going to create a new layer, as you see here, and pull it beneath the sketch again with the, so we're using Procreate only, with the hard, oops, that's probably mine, isn't it? With the airbrushing, go in and grab the hard airbrush, and then I'm going to choose a slightly darker desaturated brown for the tree stumps. Just like that. Just as a first instance, and probably want to make this here actually a little bit lighter because it's in the background. And then just to be safe, I'm going to add another layer and add my foliage with the same brush. Let's go with this. Yeah, let's go with that one first. So I'm just going to roughly fill this in. Like that. Make the brush a little bit smaller and choose a slightly more blue, green, also a bit darker for these fir trees. A bit like this. And also this here. You could put this on a separate layer because it's in front of the other tree, but in this case I won't worry too much. I'm trying to keep it a bit simpler for this tutorial. Okay, now I'm going to choose another layer, and I'm going to put that beneath these tree blocking layers, well, above the tree trunk layer, with a slightly lighter blue-green. I'm going to go and add the background fir tree. You could even go more into the lighter section of colors for this one if you wanted it to fade out more, but we can take care of that later. And then for the other one, I'll choose a slightly more yellow-green, put that also on that layer in the background, and I'm actually going to deviate from the sketch a bit more and just get that bigger, this foliage in the background. Okay, now for the grass with the same brush, I'm just gonna choose also a sort of yellow green like this, and just go in. Try not to paint over your leaves and all that, but you can also cover the bushes on the ground with this color. And since it's on a new layer, we can always erase parts that overlap onto the leaves from the trees or the trunks, so don't worry too much about it being perfect. I think I'm also going to go ahead and just cover all the rocks in this color of this layer. We can always adjust, and also the bit of sand that I wanted to add on the side. We can always adjust the colors when we color this in a moment. Okay, I will take what I did over here away. I wanted it to be a little bit more, oh, hello. I wanted it to be a bit more centered in this painting. Like that will do. Okay, take your clipping mask away and just see if it makes sense a little bit. Before, we're not going to delete that sketch layer for a while. So first I'm going to go in where we have the ground section on the separate layer, create a new layer above that and make it a clipping mask. Now I'm going to choose a sand color first, so I go into like a light orange, beige, and just add my sand on the side. Like that. I also want to make that stretch in a little bit more into the land. Maybe like this. Okay, and then a light gray for the rocks. I'm also still using the hard shading brush, the hard airbrush. Okay, so that's our rocks over here. Nice. I will go ahead and add a slightly darker green to what we were using for the ground. You can color pick that like I did. And then what I'm going to do is change my brush. I will be using the studio pen from Procreate, and with that go in and really shape out where your grass sits in the shadow. So I'm going to be doing that sort of at the base of some bushes like these guys here. Yeah, but like this. Get those bushes into the half shade. Get it into the background over here. In between bushes, this is where you sort of want to think about where your light comes from, and I'm going to make the light come sort of from this edge down to like the front, like 3/4. So that means our shadows are sort of like dropping towards the left. Alright, and obviously when you have a tree or something, you might want to think about more shadows around that area at the bottom of the rocks. Okay, and then I will choose one more darker color for the grass. churning that a bit more down to the blue and slightly down. So like the stuff that is super in the background, like this over here, and around the edge can get nicely colored in. I'm just winging it, so yeah, it might not look so good right now, or you know, you would prefer to do it differently, but you can always change it, and I will probably change it as we go, so there's no great shakes really. I'm gonna get some darkness down here around these guys, and here, and just here where the bushes sort of drop down. Alright, so that should have really helped you mark out where your territory ends and begins. I'm going to add a darker red to the edge of my boundary here, and also to the edge of my grass. It's a bit like the ground coming through. And then with the studio pen in the smudge option, I'm just gonna smudge these edges out so they are very far on the peripheral side of this and sort of blend in with the rest. And I'm also going to blend out some of these grass areas, especially where the shadows sort of converge together, where I've added the greens right next to each other, the dark ones a little bit. Not too much, because we don't want to get that sort of blended look overall, but just a little bit. Bit like this. And just get that shadow, push it back over here, pull it out over here so it sort of marks the slope of it all a little bit better, and then pushing out the edge over here. A bit like that. Okay. Alright, I will go ahead and merge that down now, and with the eraser brush and the studio pen and the eraser, I'm just going to go and take away a little bit of that edge, making sure to keep some of that dark smudge that we had. Okay, I've hidden the sketch layer, as you can see, to see what I'm doing, and now I want to go ahead and blend it back in and move on to, say, let's go for the trunk. No, let's go for the foliage next. So what do we know? We're going to start with the foliage layer, add a clipping mask again, and with the studio pen again, color pick your tree and then choose a darker color for some shading. With the fir tree, you can sort of just add a little bit more in terms of layers, so like he's wearing a dress, giving him some of these ruffles and edging the edges in a bit more, like so. You can also go ahead and erase parts of the tree, but choose the right layer for that, not like I did. And I will also go in and just make this here a bit more refined with the eraser, just erasing parts and making that shape silhouette look nicer. Then I'm gonna go and change back to the clipping layer mask and repeat the same on this side. And also going to erase some of that shape over here. Okay, and then we're going to go into the big tree for the shading. Color pick again, I'm going to choose a much more blue green than the main part was. And then with the studio pen, go in and start adding some blotches of shadow, sort of following a little bit along where you, whoops, this way you might want to be careful. And add another clipping mask layer and just add your shading for that on there, so that your other trees aren't compromised by any mistakes. I'm going to choose an even darker color for some of these parts, just adding a little bit more definition to those shadows. And where you don't like what you've done, just go back in with the eraser and okay, so that is sort of very untidy, but that's okay. I'm gonna go in now with the studio pen again in the smudge option. Actually, in this case, let's choose the painting option and use the old brush from Procreate. So you go in and you sort of start tapping to create some foliage. So this is where I added all these shadows. Now I want to go in with the smudge brush and the studio pen, or let's go with the hard air brush, and just sort of smudge out some of the shadows that you added a little bit. Like that. And then we want to add another clipping mask layer and get in the much brighter parts. For this, I'm going to get an extend out of the actual layer. So I've created a new layer and I'm just going to add some of these shapes on top. And then I'm going to choose a darker green one, but that's lighter than the shadows beneath. And I'm just going to add a small part of that here. And because we're outside of the boundaries, I want to extend the tree shape a little bit. Bit like that. Choose a slightly lighter color again and just sort of bring that together. When there are really big differences in the color value, so something is extremely dark and you try and merge it with an area that is lighter, I can recommend color picking and then choosing a slightly different color to that. So for example here, with this one, I want to get that into the shadow a bit more, so I'm going to pull it down a bit and change the hue. And straight away we've got something that is a bit more like that color, but allows it to marry into the rest of the shape a bit better. A bit like that. Okay, now I don't know if this looks like much to you yet, but we are getting somewhere. So I'm going to choose another color for the tree, the fir trees, and basically where I want to have my lighter part of the fir tree come in where the light sort of hits it. I'm going to add this new, more saturated, brighter color. As you can see, I'm focusing sort of on one side. I'm going to do the same here. When I was starting out with painting, the studio brush was my constant companion, my best friend in terms of brushes. So I still love to use this one a lot, as you can probably tell. Here I feel like there are some shadows missing, so I'm just going to add that on top. Also add a bit to the shape, like that. And because the light won't be so evenly distributed on this one, because it's sort of on the left side and not so far on the light side, there will be less of that same surface color. So it's going to be darker. A bit like that. Let's choose another color even brighter. With a lighter color, then we're going to go in again. Now we can choose something with a bit more texture, so I'm going to choose a dry ink and just see how that looks. Haha, that's cute. Okay, it's a bit thicker, but it's quite nice to paint with. So I'm just going to add In actual fact, I'm probably gonna choose the chalk brush from Procreate. I've already got that in my favorite list, so you might have to find it for a minute, but this has got great texture and it's a bit thinner than the other one, so it's easier to sort of make these thinner brush strokes with. Here also I feel like I want a bit more shadow sort of in between the different layers. So I'm just choosing a darker one and adding that in between some of these layers, so like that. Okay, and for this one I also want to do something similar. So for here I want to choose a darker color first and then add my lighter color after, but I feel like this one really needs a bit more care in terms of how the colors are sort of distributed. So I'm just gonna add that dark first. Mainly going over the areas where I added dark before. Like that. And then I'm going in with the brighter color and adding that selectively to the parts where I feel like the light will come the most. Which is sort of on the right side, and because obviously there's a light source on the left, but not the bright warm light, I'm going to choose a less saturated color, which is also similar in terms of brightness, and add that over there. Never too sure how much I should be explaining when I'm doing these things, so please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, I definitely feel like I'd like to change some things about the shape over here. So I'm going to erase parts of the tree. Oops. If I can find the right layer over here. Alright. Let's merge this stuff together so it's not as confusing. And now it's all on one layer, all the foliage. Besides this. So let's get that down as well, like that. And with the smudge brush and the chalk, with the smudge option and the chalk brush, I want to go in and add, or rather smudge together some of these colors to really make the tree in the front stand out. And I'm gonna hide the sketch layer for this and just start sort of smudging very carefully these things together very lightly. As you can see, I don't want to change how the colors are sitting too much. I just want them to merge into each other a bit more seamlessly, or well, see, this is what I'm trying to avoid actually, so perhaps making sure that the shadows aren't too smudged in. And adapting the shape. Alright, I think that looks solid as a first begin, and I really want to smudge together some of these parts as well, also with the chalk brush, just going in and getting some of that detail looking a bit more together, or as you might see, you're missing some highlights or something. All of these layers of added details, and that will really create a beautiful texture at the end. So I always think it's worth it, really, just adding more and more details. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to try and keep it relatively short. I've been wanting to make more tutorials for a while now, especially since sort of being monetized last year and that, but honestly, the tutorials, they take quite a long time for longer paintings, and even this that I thought I would do much quicker ended up already filming, I think, is well over an hour. So if you have anything you'd like to see that I haven't done yet on my channel, please let me know. I really value your feedback and opinion, and it just helps me create more things that are interesting as well. So switching back to the hard airbrush and a new layer above the background foliage, I'm going to color pick and choose slightly darker, still very desaturated colors, and just go in and add some shadow. Bit like that. And then also to the other fir tree, color picking shows we're here, so slightly darker will be sort of here. I'm going to merge these layers together for the background foliage, and I'm just going to add a bit of refinement to the shape. I don't know, I don't like the fat fur thingies. I'm going to add some more with the studio brush, a studio pen, and the colors that we've just added. Could be that I'm putting back exactly what I just deleted, but as I said, I'm winging it more or less. You can add a bit more refinement to that shadow that you added in there as well, and I'm going to delete this part here. And then with the same color that we had originally. Just go in and add your layers again of color, as in lightness, just a bit more. And then we're going to choose another lighter color than that and just sort of add those sparingly. Bit like that. And get in a bit of variation. Get another darker shadow in there. And just brush it in. I'm still using the studio pen. Too much detail is also a bit too much sometimes, so don't necessarily need the chalk brush, but I'm going to use that one in the smudging anyways, and just merge some of these colors together a little bit with some added texture, so it's not all sort of airbrushed at the end of the day. Alright, and then for this one over here, I think that is pretty good. I might use slightly more saturated foliage color for this part. It is behind the other one, so it's not an unreasonable assumption to think that this is gonna be hit by light more, but if you prefer to leave it darker, that's alright as well. Alright, and for this part now I want to change on the base layer, and I'm going to add a new layer of course for security. I'm going in and just adding brighter greens at the top of these bushes to really make them stand out. I'm using the chalk brush for some texture. Obviously they're not all going to be the same color, so you can just change your hue and your brightness level a bit and experiment. I'm going to use a darker bush over here and here, and just sort of start shading this part, I suppose, like that. For the grass, I'm going to color pick the lighter color, choose a more saturated version, green, yellow, and add that as well. I feel like my bushes are super bright, so I'm gonna add slightly darker colors into them as well with the same brush, just little squiggly motions and making that brighter part less. Choosing a more saturated version perhaps in the darker spectrum, and just adding that in there. And then choosing a more blue one, because we've got these wonderful little pockets of shadow around here. I'm gonna add these here as well. I much prefer this level of shadow in between, but as you can see, it's quite a strong contrast to the brighter parts of the bushes. So what I'm gonna do is now I'm going to sort of try and get those closer together. So once I'm ready, I will sort of color pick the parts of the bushes that are too dark and then go into slightly lighter parts. Very slight changes. There, I'm much happier with that. Although it might look a little bit less orderly than the tree layers. Here I'm also going to choose a slightly darker color to the one I added on the ground and just sort of create an ombre. Like that. And adding that lighter color where the sunlight hits. Alright, this is looking a bit better. Now I want to add my rock texture, and then we're going to go into heavy detailing on the trees, and that's it. So I'm going to merge that together like this, create a new clipping mask layer to the ground layer, and with the chalk brush, because why not, I'm going to go and add a slightly darker color shadow. I forget that I've put that all on the same layer. In fact, I'm going to choose an even more desaturated version of shadow, like this. Okay, for the actual, because I sort of see rocks in 3 colors, I'm going to choose a lighter one than the rock is already colored in, and just choose the part where I feel the light will come on the most to help me create a shape for the rock. Slightly darker for those in the shade. And then go back in and sort of try and make a shape happen. Perhaps this one I'm going to go for a bit of a different shape. And I want to take parts away from the shapes of the rocks that I added earlier, just to sort of enhance the rock shape. With this rock, I feel like I want to turn it around a bit, so I've merged those layers together, and I'm gonna select the rock that I've got here and make him lie down a bit more, like that. Erase the parts that have remained separate, and then go back into the other layer in the background to add the things that are missing. Bit like that. With this layer in the background, I'm actually going to enlarge in this tree so it sort of fills out this part better instead of adding a huge chunk of tree. Alright, now for assimilating this rock, getting some more green in here. And perhaps a bit more in the shade. Like that. Let's go ahead and start adding some more better details. So I'm gonna create a new layer above all else. And we don't need a sketch anymore, but I've just checked. So I'm going to resort to the chalk brush again and choose this part here and just start to add a little bit more foliage detail to this wonderful tree. I sort of want to have one that is less saturated in color like this, and just get in some more variety. A bit like that, and let's get in some darker one as well, like that. Just sort of carving out where we want the light to hit and what shape the tree is then gonna have. Gonna have some light hit over here and over here. That's already light. Okay. So to make this tree complete, obviously the bark is missing. With a lighter color than what we've got there in the base, I'm just gonna go in and add some rough streaks like that. And then a darker one to really get the shadow in. Like, whoops, let's go back. I like that little edge here. And it's gonna vanish up there and just add a couple of streaks of shadow like this. Alright, and I wanted to get some moss up there, so let's grab some dark olive colored green and get some shadow on there as well, a bit like that, just sort of making the shadow come up a little bit towards the lighter parts of the tree bark, where we're going to add the lighter color of moss green. We're still very much in the darker area of colors because I, generally speaking, take caution with adding bright colors too fast. It looks weird, like with the bushes initially and all that. Okay, so I'm okay with that. I might just add a little bit more of a red and a slightly darker to the tree bark up here and here. Let's move on to this one, and I'm going to choose a darker color here first, moving more into the red area. And sort of adding the boundaries to the trunk, then adding a couple of streaks of dark. Add a bit of that. And then we want to add a lighter color. That is sort of getting the light on it. Add a more reddish color at the bottom of the lighter color, where most of the light is going to hit. I'm going with a chalk brush and smudge and just giving this a bit of a smudge out, like that. You can do the same with this tree. And we can always correct things later again. And then for this one, also choosing a darker color. And obviously there's going to be more dark coming down from here, but I still want to get those streaks in for the bark. A bit like that. We can have the root come out a bit more here. I'm just giving this a bit of a stronger boundary so it's more visible. I mean, this here wouldn't have technically a lot of light on it, so I would generally say go into the desaturated area like this. This is the desaturated area and this is the saturated. And also maybe into the blue if you want to experiment with your environmental bounce light colors. But yeah, we're just gonna keep it relatively simple now. Okay, and then obviously we've got the background one. Similar process. Choose a dark and whoops, I'm going to keep the light color from that bark like that. With this one, I'm going to choose a slightly darker color for the foliage. And make it look like it's sort of being enveloped, that tree trunk. Adding a couple of shades of green. And then making this here look a little bit more like a rounded shape for the leaves. That is too bright. More like that. Oops, what's happening? And then I'm gonna go and merge this here down a little bit. Okay, then one more thing, I want to add some more darker here. Now I wanted to go ahead and choose the studio pen. And we're gonna start adding some, actually let's choose the old brush. We're gonna choose a brighter color. And preferably a smaller shape of brush, and go in and hit the light with the bright, like that. Give it some texture. Get in some saturated greens, whether they're olive like this one, or they are more like this one. we're sort of just adding to the structure that we added earlier to the tree. I mean, preferably you don't want to hide the tree like I did here. When you feel like something's hidden, like this part, just go in with your studio pen and add in some brighter foliage that is going to help structure the part again. With the studio pen, I'm going in and erasing the parts that I added earlier that really fall out of the bounds of what I want in terms of my tree shape. And I'm not going to go too much more detailed, even though I'd love to. In this tutorial, I will just add a few more things, like down here. I'm going to add some darker color in case you can see that with the phone. I hope you can see that. I'm adding darker foliage parts that lead up into the tree crown. And sort of add to the shape a bit more. Sometimes there are leaves that stick out in other areas of the tree that hit the light, and they will be really bright and look like they're sort of sticking out by themselves, which they are, I guess. So you can add a couple of like random bits of leaf, preferably in many different colors, to add to that variety of tree foliage. And obviously also the darker areas will sort of, there will be shadows in between sections. Okay, with the brush over here, I'm just going to add a couple of little dots as well on the background tree. And just make sure that the other tree boundary sort of looks a bit more natural. So adding a bit more foliage like this here and this, and get a bit more green that is lighter in here as well. Like that. Alright. In terms of shading and stuff, well, obviously I'd love to do some more on the bushes. I still got the studio pen, and I really enjoy adding like all these little details. I think they add so much to the painting. But it's the same principle. I'm using the brighter colors from the bushes or color picking darker ones, and then moving up or down slightly in terms of brightness, value and saturation. Class time flies when I'm doing this, and I am supposed to be doing other stuff as well. I did a painting the other day for, I think, a Patreon demonstration, and I thought I really took 30 minutes on it, and it was 1.5 hours. That is just how fast it goes. With the grass, I would be adding like little grass bits here and there, especially when you've got areas that are lighter against darker. You're really sort of making sure that the texture is being conveyed, like here and here. And here. In different shades in that as well, different green colors. Okay, I would love to add some color and light, so let's start with our overlay layer. This is my usual method anyways. With the hard airbrush, I'm gonna add some shadow in the blue section of color, and especially around areas where I feel like very little light will actually reach the part. Obviously, when you're adding this, it might look really exaggerated and strong, and then you can just go in and change that. It's just to give you an idea with light in that and color. I'm gonna add some here and here. You can really make some parts stick out or fade away. In terms of fading, I will be using a more yellow color and get that in between where I want to have a bit more light come through, like here and here and potentially here. I like that sort of orangey, yellowy look on the ground, on the rocks. Bit of a darker shadow over here. And then a lighter blue one at the edge that will really add to your desaturated colors if you, like me, haven't really added much of that yet. Well, in terms of like the bark and stuff, I mean. You can see that things are turning a bit more blue where I'm going over with this brush. And I want to add some more shadow as well. And here, there's obviously too much. I feel like that is just like, nope. So I'm gonna erase that part, erase this part, make sure the ones that are too strong are sort of pushed back a bit. I don't like what I did with the stone here too much. I'm gonna go in with the smudge brush, with the chalk brush and smudge, and just smudge out that shadow that I added earlier, like that. Give it a bit more of a shape. Okay, and now for the overlay layer, I want to add some brighter colors where the light will hit the most. Whoops, and you can see that's really strong. So just gently brushing it in with the hard shading, with the hard airbrush, like that, and a little bit less yellow perhaps for the fir trees, like this. And a little bit less over there. That is a bit too strong. Don't like that so much. Get in with the really desaturated, and I'm just going to add that to the background one. Alright, and then in terms of the bark, I'm going to add that red hue. And some more, just some brighter color, more saturated on the bushes that sort of enclose the rocks. Like this. So this is the difference that our overlay layer made. It's a big difference in my opinion. I like it. And now on the add layer, I want to add texture and brightness. So let's start with the stucco brush from Procreate, and I'm going in with a bright sand color, I guess. Perhaps this is not the right texture for this one, but this will be the right texture for the stone. So let's go for the stone first. And I'm going to distort what I did there just to give it better shape. And then once that is done, I'm going to erase the parts that I feel like are obviously not on the rock. So let's go in with an eraser. This is just to add some first texture basically. Like that. And then with the Oberon brush from Procreate, I'm going in and getting some of that sand texture on there, on this sort of beachy part. There we go. Nice. Also using that on the trunk of the trees. And a more desaturated vibe on the side where the sun doesn't really get to, but not too much because that is still in the shadow. Like that doesn't work for me over here. And then get some more on the rock. Now with the chalk brush and a bright color, I really want to, with the chalk brush, I want to add a nice boundary to the rock to give it a bit better shape. And also some really nice highlights with the chalk brush on the actual tree trunks. Like that. And we mustn't forget the one that is over there, but that's going to be really desaturated and really translucent highlight. Like that. Okay, now for the texture with the painting tools. Using the, we can use the old brush, but I'm not a fan of that anymore with the originals too much. I want to use more of the turpentine. Use a separate layer of add for that because it's going to be really strong. Really strong. And just carefully add that. As careful as you can. This is where having this is not working out as I'd like it to. This is where having my own brushes is helpful. Okay, let's then use this studio pen and just go in and add a heck of a lot of detail with this bright yellow on the add layer. Just where you know the sun is gonna hit the leaves the most. Up here and down here, and I want to get a bit more of a, yeah, get that light on there basically. I have actually created a leaf brush as well for my own collection of things, but like with everything, I'm not a fan of the stamp brushes too much because I tend to rely on them, and that is not very helpful for me. Okay, with the chalk brush I'm going in and adding some real nice highlights to the fir tree, keeping in mind that too many highlights across everything probably more ruins it than not. But we want to add some light on here for sure. Like that. Perhaps simply selectively choosing. This here I feel like is too bright. So with the hard airbrush, I'm just gonna very gently go over the parts that I added here, and that will erase it a little bit, but not fully, which is my aim. Similarly with the side on here, just a little bit. And I also want to go in and erase a little bit in between here, where the turpentine brush did not work out as I wanted. I will try with the old brush again down here with the foliage, because that is sort of what I usually do with my own brushes. I go in with the texture brush, adding a bunch. If you have got the time to do this with your hand, that would be beautiful. Okay, and then with the chalk brush, I want to go in and add a bit of grass that is brighter. Now this looks a little bit like it's sort of like lost, like where is the rest of the bright grass and that, but with the hard airbrush in a minute, I want to go ahead and add a larger patch of grass that is brighter, like a sort of light spot on the grass, and then it will fit in. basically get the hard airbrush, and with a warm color I'm gonna add some light here where the rock is hit, just around. Here, erase the parts that are really too bright, like on the rock, for example, and just sort of like the edges of the grass that is really bright now. How about that, hey? That looks nice. Now I want to go ahead and just sort of smudge out the detail on this rock. I'm using the chalk brush again. Surprise, surprise. Definitely my favorite brush at the minute on Procreate. Just really smudging out a little bit of that texture that looks fake. And yeah, I'm gonna go in and just add a little bit of this with the chalk brush and a lower making this a bit more translucent, and just going in and adding some more light detail. Making sure all of the leaves are included, like that. Okay, and then another thing I'd like to do is with the hard airbrush, adding a bit of light on the add layer in between these beautiful trees, like so. A bit of diffused light. It can be too much. If it's too much for you, just leave it away. I'm gonna add some light over here, and on the overlay layer I'm gonna go and add some really strong green olive for the grass front. Less left out in terms of light and color. Okay. Alright. Now there are a couple of things I'd like to do with finishing with a normal layer. With the studio pen I want to go in and add my branches first. I'm just gonna add that like that, and then choose a darker color with the chalk brush, go in and add some detail, just a bit of texture. And then with like a more grayish color, go in and add that reflecting light a little bit. Just adding a bit more, oops, hello, realistic shape. And similarly, I want to add, this is still on a normal layer, I want to add some darker foliage that sort of reaches out, because I'm not entirely happy with the shape of the tree. I feel like it looks really a bit like cauliflower, I suppose. Like this, what is happening? And therefore, yeah, I'd like to change that up there, but how will I do that? Let's go back to the base and just sort of erase parts, make it look less rounded, because I feel like the roundedness is the part where it has the potential to look really unnatural. And I'm also going to add a darker color that sort of comes out here. Now I know this is still super rounded, but hopefully this will fade into the background a little bit more with this lighter color. Okay. You can see these parts where there is an unnatural discoloration. That is where the add layer has got its light on it too much. So I want to go in there and just sort of rectify that part. Like that. Perhaps delete just a tiny bit of the edge. Like that. And I also want to add a slightly darker color in here. Not that dark at the edge. Yeah, that'll be fine. And why don't we give the whole thing a little bit of a part where it comes out over here as well. Just to make it a bit more unique in shape again. Where is that color sticking out? So this here is a bit too vibrant for me. That would be here and here and this part. Okay, that looks a lot better, I would say, without even going into too much more detailing. I am just going to add a little bit more of a warm, specific glow where I want to add my source of fairy lights in that. If you know my art, you know I'm into that sort of stuff, painting magical sort of stuff. Okay. So with the original light pen, I'm gonna go in and with a really nice saturated color, I'm gonna go and add my fairy lights. Sure, they could be flowers too. You could add flowers anyways, if you wanted. And why don't we turn the background color slightly darker? Haha. Now you can see where all the add is coming out to play. I don't know why I didn't do that sooner, just merge it together. Alright, and that is that. I mean, we could add some more shadows here in that, more detail, but I think that's alright for a first demonstration. Let me know what you think, and if you have any comments to the actual tutorial and the way I did it, let me know. I'm sorry this is a long one again, I really tried. And hopefully see you in the next one soon.